And welcome to Beyond the Dollar Signs with your host, Mark Taylan. Mark, the great wealth transfer. Boy, I've heard that phrase. I'm sure most of our listeners have probably heard that phrase. But that's what's on the table to talk about today. And probably the best place to start would be with, what is the great wealth transfer anyway?
Well, Bill, as baby boomers get older, right? Eventually they say statistically in the next 20 years, 80 to $100 trillion.
That's with a T, right? That's with a T, not a B, a trillion. Wow.
80 to $100 trillion will transfer to the next generation. So baby boomers to the millennials, to Generation X, you're going to see this big transfer of wealth.
Wow, that's a lot of money. I've heard the phrase before. I've even talked about it before, but it raises all kinds of questions, Mark, because it's like, it's an incomprehensible number. So let's break it down into some simple stuff here. Like, what does this mean for families and for the people who are passing it on, the people who receive it? Break this down for us. What does it mean, and what should we be aware of?
Well, this is a really is a topic that's talked about really with my later stage clients, the older clients that once they reach I would say we start to have these conversations around 75 on up, right? And the big thing is they've really figured out that they're probably not going to spend all of their assets, that they've done really well for themselves. They've got plenty of income coming in. And so now they're looking at the assets they acquired. Maybe it's real estate, investments, businesses, a combination of things. And how will those assets transfer to their children first off, right? And so with that becomes a lot of discussion about, if it's a business, is the family in the business? Well, do they want that business? And, a lot of times that's not the case. The families don't want to continue the legacy or the family business. And so there's discussions about what are they going to do with that business? What makes sense from a tax standpoint? How do they effectively transition that? Should they sell that business now? Should they start, work? And so a lot of discussions come around the topic of the different assets and how to pass that to your beneficiaries most effectively.
Yeah, wow. Because the business one especially hits home, because I know that most family businesses don't survive past a third generation. It gets increasingly rare. And like a lot of people are like, this is great and it's good, but this is not my interest. This is not what I do. This is not what I want to do, as a matter of fact. So I would imagine these conversations are, well, one, I'm sure they're very interesting, but two, they must be better had sooner as opposed to later, because I know that there are a lot of statistics that we could talk about in here in terms of what happens. So give us a picture of that.
Well, I think one of the things that, families start to think about is, I know what assets that I have. They've got a really clear idea usually at that point and identify the assets. They've done typically the estate planning, which means they've met with a living trust, an attorney, estate planning attorney, like our former guest, Barbara Pretlove. And they've mapped out who the beneficiaries are, identified typically what assets pass the beneficiaries. And that typically covers the big assets, but then they also start to think about, well, should I gift now? Could my family use it? Would I prefer to see them, enjoy that gift and be more productive with that? Or do I wait until I'm gone? So these are discussions that we have often with clients of, should we start gifting? Should we, and because the way the tax code is, there's a certain amount of money that you can gift every year. So a husband and wife could give $16,000 a year based on the gift taxes. So $32,000 combined. essentially typically flies under the radar where they don't have to report that.
Right.
It's part of the annual gift tax exclusion. So it's kind of fascinating to see how, a lot of parents and adults and people that I talk to want to help them now because they see that some of the family could use the money now. Maybe they're in a difficult situation and they've got plenty of assets. And so they start to think about and do actually planning and say, okay, we've had a great year. The markets have been amazing this year. We've made a lot of money and we would like to start gifting to the family because we want them to, benefit from our hard work. And so I think that, and I've seen that in my own practice, I've seen families adopt those strategies and every year it's not mandatory, it's discretionary. And so that when they've had a good year and they want to start gifting, they know who their beneficiaries are. That is what they do. They will start to do that. And so I think it's really nice to see sometimes I've seen how the families are so impacted by that gift. And I think it's great to watch that.
Yeah. There is the benefit of, and you mentioned it, of the fact that, this is a gift that is exempt from taxes. So neither party has to declare it. It's perfectly legal. It's probably arguably a smart way to do it. But the way you determine that is sit down with your financial advisor, sit down with your estate planning attorney and make those decisions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I think, beyond the dollars, let's talk a little bit about the value set, that multi-generational transfer, because
yes.
A lot of these families, they have certain values and they were very disciplined and worked hard to acquire that money. And so I believe that, they want to make sure that a lot of them anyway, want to make sure that their values are passed on and live and their legacy continues, not only sometimes with their children, but their grandchildren. And so there's been such a tremendous creation of wealth that I run into clients. And it's like, well, you can effectively have an impact on future generations of your family. A lot of successful people have successful children, and that goes on to their grandchildren, and that creates legacy. And so what I find fascinating is that through proper planning, they can really have a huge impact in generations of families. So I really, it's really great to see people take it to that level. And so another thing comes up is how will families or how will your beneficiaries handle a large sum of money?
Well, I was just going to ask you that. I was just going to say, I would imagine that part of this conversation is sitting down and saying, this is what we plan to do. And it's a lot of money. I mean, let's be honest. It's suddenly there's a lot of money that's starting to flow through the pipeline. I mean, let's pretend I'm your client, and do I need to have these conversations with my kids or my grandkids or whoever it is that I'm gifting the money to? And how do I impart the fact that, I don't want to say I have expectations, but I do, right? I do, because I'm like, I love you and I'm passing this on to you because I want to give you a head start. And sure. I need you to understand that this is significant without making a overblown big deal out of it.
It's a delicate situation, Bill, absolutely. Because number one, a lot of times, you're not as transparent with your children or your beneficiaries on what assets that you have.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine all of a sudden you're looking at your parents' portfolio and there's multi-millions of dollars there when you figure out the real estate and the asset, and you're like, oh my goodness, it's quite a bit of money. And what I've seen in my practice is usually when there's multiple siblings, sometimes, there's one or two that the parents will choose as the administrator or the successor trustee to administer the estate. And so money can create problems within families.
Yeah.
As you know, it's so important to have these discussions, be transparent, And I think the estate planning process is really critical because it's black and white. It's your wishes on paper and legally done, so that there's not any infighting between families. Like, how do you, why are you doing it this way? If you are named as the executor of an estate, why is it being done this way? Well, I'm following what the wishes were based on the trust, right? And so it's very important that you're transparent about that. And sometimes maybe there's one of the siblings is not very responsible with money.
Yeah.
What do you do when that's kind of a scenario, right? I mean, it really is, I think, it's almost a lottery scenario if you think about it in a sense, because from one moment, you're fine, and all of a sudden, maybe you're going to inherit $1 to $2 or $3 million, right? And it's that instant lottery feeling, like, I've never had this type of money. What does that mean? What can I do with it? And we've all heard the statistics, right? I mean, if you don't have a plan, that money can be spent very quickly.
Yep.
And so a lot of times what I've also seen is when you have a sibling or a child that you're unclear about, or you're not certain they can handle that type of money, conversations around that money are important. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have somebody managing that money on that person's behalf. And so discussions come up about, should we just give them a lump sum? Mm-hmm. Should we give them an income stream instead of the lump sum? For example, let's not give them $2 million cash, and so they can go buy a sports car and spend it, go crazy.
Sure.
But maybe the right thing is a combination of, let's give them an income they can't outlive, right? Let's give them a monthly income stream, so that way we know that money is going to protect them regardless of what happens, and maybe some money in cash as well, right? And so it really depends on the maturity level, and how the parents feel about how are they going to handle money. And so I think those are important decisions and discussions to have.
When you're having these discussions, Mark, do you encourage your clients to bring the kids in? Do you say, bring the kids in so that they can see this and create an air of transparency so that everybody knows what's going on?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of my clients about that early on. And I say to them, at some point in the future, I would like to meet your children. I want to get to know your family. And at some point, we're going to have a discussion. If you're okay with it, and when you're ready, we're going to have a discussion with them and have a look at the big picture and what you have. Because number one, if you need to step in, you need to understand what assets that your parents have at their disposal. But two, we also they want you to have visibility. And so I always say to clients, it's really case by case. But again, if you walk into a conference room and all of a sudden you're seeing all of your parents' assets, it's like, wow. And are they ready for that? Right? Are they ready for that? And are the parents ready to share that with their children? And what I often say is, they don't need to see, if you want me to redact, we use a technology called Asset Map, meaning that everything's on one screen, on one page. Yep. And if you want me to redact the dollar amounts for the time being and just want you to see, like, we've got our primary residence, we're carrying no debt. We've got these 2 rental properties. Your dad and I have both retirement accounts, Social Security, pensions, and investments. This is what's in place. I don't know what's going to be there when the time comes, but this is what the big picture looks like, and this is what the inheritance will be. And we want you to be aware of that. This is how that conversation will go.
Yeah.
We want you to be aware of this, and so you can see that. And I find that, gosh, it gives my clients peace of mind and comfort when they leave. They're like, okay, my family's on board. One of the biggest worries that a lot of my clients have is, will my family be okay? Is everything in order?
Yeah.
Over years, they acquire so much paperwork. They've got all these things. And it's like, are they going to be okay? And I think that helps validate that for them. And gosh, it's a discussion. Can you imagine that in the next 20 years, all this wealth transfer that's going to happen and what the impact's going to be on families? It's going to be amazing. You're going
It's
to
going to
hear
be transformative. I mean,
good and bad stories. You're going to hear the horror stories.
Yep.
You're going to hear so many different things about this.
I'm curious, do you incorporate, or do you find the need to incorporate any sort of financial education? It's just sort of when you're sitting down and talking with the would be beneficiaries. Do you have conversations like trying to get them up to speed? I mean, I don't know how that would go because I realize that's a delicate situation as well. But I'm curious if that's a topic.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We run a multi-generational practice here, so often I'll start with the parents, and they've been my clients for over 20 years. At some point, I'm going to meet the kids. It's important if they have children. And then at some point, and typically those children become my clients. And then so we can see that succession. I'm already working with, the parents, of course, encourage them, come meet with Mark. We want to discuss our things, but also the door's open to you. And so that way, when that transition happens, I already know them. I already have, we've already discussed the financial plan on their own finances. And often, like I said, what is the saying, Bill? The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree, right? If the parents are successful, they're usually successful. And most of the time they're okay on their own, actually. Sometimes they've done really well. And so the inheritance that comes from mom and dad, what are they going to do with that? How do they position that? And so, then we start talking about other topics and grandkids. But to your point, we certainly engage with the family members, the beneficiaries, and try to do some planning with them, because it's like anything else. You have to have a plan for when that money comes, and we want to make sure that, we're doing the right thing for them.
Yeah. Now I know we touched on the tax issue by when you started talking about, the fact that reminding everybody they can legally by tax law give a certain dollar amount every year to their kids. I know for a fact there are other strategies. Do you get involved with that, or do you raise those issues so that they can talk to their attorney about them, or how do you go about dealing with those?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of strategies out there these days to be able to maximize how much you can gift to your beneficiaries. There's utilization of different products. We won't get into that today, but there's products that are out there that can fund that guaranteed income for your family. So there's a lot of structures in place. And if a family is willing to, if their goal really is to maximize how much their children are going to have, or the beneficiaries are going to have, or if they really want, instead of a lump sum of cash, they want to fund an income stream, utilizing the gifts, right? Let's say you're going to, would you rather get $250,000 in cash now, or would you rather have an income that's 5 or 10 times that amount over your lifetime? So this is where families can really do that planning and set up the legacy for their children. And so I'm hoping that, people meet with advisors and talk about that, because I think it's a great opportunity to, all that hard work that you've put in and all these assets can pass to the next generation in a very productive way, in ways that can be transformative, as we said about this whole topic.
Yeah, no, totally true. And I would guess that you probably encourage your clients to really sit down with an attorney, because it is so important that they document what they want, because once they're gone, they're not there to speak for themselves anymore. So they need to create, not only with the transparency, but also they need to create legally a documentation of what they want to do. And I would imagine that is probably the impetus for every conversation along this lines that you must have.
It's heartbreaking to see family and money and that combination when things are not in order. Yeah. And let me tell you, even when things are in order, it's still a little tough, right? There's still a little bit of doubt sometimes. And so you have to be very transparent. If you're the trustee, even though legally it says that you have the power to be able to administer based on the trust, I would recommend, and doing it myself as well, that you're as transparent with your other beneficiaries as possible. And that those beneficiaries often always can include a spouse, right? They've got spouses as well. Yep. So that's where the challenge is. It's communication and transparency. And so certainly, have that communication, have your documents in order.
Great. So let's end this with a little bit of a call to action, if you will. Sum this up and tell us what we need to do in terms of getting a checklist in order and making sure we take care of things.
I would call this topic, the great wealth transfer and estate planning. This is where the later stage estate planning is important. And so it's very important to have all of your finances in order. And that should be that's your call to action. Get everything in order so that way your family is protected.
And as always, dear listener, Mark is there to help you if you need some help. So reach out to him. And if you're not a client of Mark's, you can reach out to him as well. And Mark, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you if they'd like to maybe have a conversation about some of the stuff we're talking about?
Yeah, we'd love to have that conversation. Schedule a time with us in person or on Zoom. Zoom is amazing these days because we can have a conversation like this over the phone, and we'd love to do that. It's advisors360pwm.com. Our information will be in the show notes, so please reach out.
Yeah. Down there in the show notes, folks, if you're unable to, memorize things, which who can, right? You're probably driving, listening to this. Check the show notes and do reach out to Mark. The other thing you can do, you probably do it right away, actually, is just reach out and become a subscriber. Hit the follow button. The reason to do that is because you are now a subscriber, and every time Mark drops a new episode, you're notified. It's that simple. I would also like to add a personal request here. If you like the podcast, tell people about it, please. Word of mouth promotion is an invaluable tool, and we would very much appreciate you recommending Mark to people who you think might be able to use his help and find him useful and informative. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Mark and everybody at Advisors 360, thank you for taking the time to listen today, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Dollar Signs Financial Clarity. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at advisors360pwm.com or give us a call at 408-778-8280. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Advisors 360. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions that you may have regarding your investment planning. ECA does not provide tax or legal advice. Guest opinions are their own and may not reflect those of ECA. The viewer is encouraged to seek their own individualized tax and legal advice from a qualified professional.